Hello, everyone. Let us begin. Thank you for joining the session. And my name is Adil Nurmakov. I'm the chairperson at the Urban Forum Kazakhstan, the public foundation that is uh, it is the fifth year that we are keeping ourselves busy promoting the dialogue in Kazakhstani cities between the various stakeholders, promoting citizen engagement in decision making, and promoting sustainable development of our cities and towns. And today um, uh, we are about to uh, celebrate the uh, continuation or the comeback of the educational program called Cities and People, which we launched 3 years ago. And since then, we had quite a few good lecturers from various parts of the world. Uh, so what we would do in the pre-COVID-19 times, pre-pandemic times, we would uh, find a good speaker, a professional in architecture, urban design, or uh, or anything else. Yeah, like sometimes there were artists visiting us, and bring those people to Kazakhstan, to Almaty, or to a few other cities, to let them uh, see the country and share their perspective uh, on architecture, on urban development, and so on and so forth. Uh, that was an experience that can't be substituted with any other digital uh, solutions. Uh, so when we found out that we cannot do that uh, anymore and won't be able to do that in the foreseeable future, we started thinking of other options because the knowledge sharing and expertise sharing and the networking should not stop and should not be hampered by conditions that we are facing currently. Uh, and I am very grateful to the Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands in Kazakhstan for supporting us in this adventure to try a digital format of the Cities and People program. So what we did, we found Sjors, a great expert on recycling infrastructure design, and we found a great videographer uh, back there in the Netherlands who shot the video lecture for us, shot and edited it, and then we translated it into Russian and Kazakh. And since this Monday, it is available on our YouTube channel and will remain there for open access for everyone in 3 languages. So that made us think that maybe it's not that um, bad that we were put in the conditions that made us seek new formats, because that would enable much more people to access this content at any time, not just by visiting a lecture uh, in some venue, at some venue. Yeah, uh, today we are hosting this Q&A session with Sjors. We are um, Very grateful again to Sjors for finding time both to shoot the video lecture, which took, I guess, quite a lot of time. It lasts an hour and with a little bit, an hour-ish. But to film it, it definitely took much more time. And we are grateful to Sjors for finding time today, Saturday morning, back in the Netherlands. It is morning, to talk to us, to continue the conversation. So, and it was indeed a crucial part of the Cities and People program that the audience was able to ask the questions, and we really didn't want to lose this component. So thank you for finding time and for making your contribution a two-way road, so that it's not only a lecture but also a dialogue. And before we start, I would it is my pleasure to ask the Deputy Ambassador of the Dutch Embassy in Kazakhstan, Nout. I would like to give the floor to you, the virtual floor to you, and for opening remarks. Again, with big thanks from Urban Forum Kazakhstan's team. Nout, passing the mic to you.
Thank you, Adil. Spasiba, Rahmet. Good afternoon. Dobry dzień, dobre utro for Sjors and Selim. Before I start with my opening remarks, let me make two pre-opening remarks. First of all, to thank the translator for translating my intervention, which will be in English, into Russian. It's very good and important that we have such a translator among us. And well, based on one of the questions in the chat, I can confirm from my side that it's by definition not a robot at all, but that it's a real lady. So that's one. Second, I assume that you can see here on the back, I have to say that, this picture of quite a new project of like 3 years ago, more or less, that the city of Astana, now Nur Sultan, made. It's a great project, but in practice, it doesn't go as it should go, based on the different line that you see, and maybe we can say a little bit more about that later during this Zoom chat. Having said that, then I would say that the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, together with Urban Forum Kazakhstan, which is the independent institution and dialogue platform for exchange on sustainable urban development in Kazakhstan, we are proud to welcome this lecture today. And we are quite welcome, we are very welcome, as a matter of fact, to welcome our honorable speaker, Mr. Sjors van Duren, who is senior consultant on sustainable mobility, expert on cycling mobility, and working at Royal Haskoning DHV. One of the important priorities of the embassy is to contribute to the development of sustainable and smart urban environment in the cities of Kazakhstan. How to build cities for people. How to manage urban processes for the sake of progress and prosperity. How to engage citizens in transformations. How to create sustainable collaborations between businesses and local communities. How artists can generate public spaces and pay respect to local identity? Do citizens share common values? And why is that important? What are the strategic approaches to designing urban space? These kind of questions the Embassy and the Urban Forum are raising at activities like the one today, to learn from our experts, to get inspired by the new ideas, and to bring the positive change to the places where we live. Transfer of knowledge and access to the expertise are key to building competitive skills and mindset that is open to innovation and experimentation. In the Netherlands, we try to create urban environment that is human-centric, sustainable, resilient, and Dutch speakers participating in this project are open to bring light to the Netherlands' best practices in smart city management and planning with all of you today. We hope to stimulate public discussion between city-level stakeholders and generate new ideas, especially among youth. We hope this project will lead to new collaboration between Kazakhstan and the Netherlands in the field of smart city development. Some final words about cycling. Cycling helps to improve the quality of our public space. Cycling is silent and helps to reduce traffic noise. Bicycle use reduces CO2 footprint. Compared to cars and buses, the project life cycle of a bicycle generates minimum carbon emissions. And cycling is the most modern, efficient, and sustainable method of transport. Well, I mean, I can't hide, I'm a cyclist myself, so I'm very much I'm in favor of this kind of development also on a personal level. Having said that, I'm very much looking forward to this Zoom meeting. Hope for an interactive discussion, which maybe in itself again may generate some new ideas and perspectives. Thank you very much. Спасибо большое. Rahmet and Udaiche.
Thank you, Nout. Before I announce the rules for the session, how the mechanism, how it's going to be run, Sjors, I guess it would be good to hear a few words from yourself about I don't know, self-introduction or anything you want to say to say hi to the audience. I really hope that our participants had a chance to watch the lecture, so that they are familiar with your stand and with your thoughts. But maybe just a few words, I guess that would be nice. Yours.
Thank you, Adil, for the introduction. Thank you, Nout, for the cooperation with the embassy. I'm delighted and grateful that I can present here and go into a discussion with you. It was also an honor to publish this video, and even although it's 67 minutes, I hope that you were all able to watch it. As said, I'm Sjors van Duren. I work in the Netherlands on a very broad set of cycling projects. So I've been responsible for the development of the cycling highway network in Arnhem and Nijmegen, which is a urban region in the east, where we've been working to create better cycling infrastructure in cities which faced issues with congestion, air pollution, and livability. And nowadays, I'm actually working throughout the whole country and also working in Germany and the UK to see how local governments, regional governments, and actually also national governments can develop better cycling policies, so make better plans, but also really making the switch to implementation, because if you write something down and you make a nice book out of it, it doesn't mean that anything gets done. So the trick is, in my opinion, finding the connection between strategic thinking and implementation, and creating the measures which you need, whether they will be infrastructure, communication, or governance, and trying to find the right mix for the right country, with, in the end, more livable, more sustainable cities. That's what I'm working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sjors. Indeed, your lecture was covering a lot of very important issues that it is actually a great manual on how to start thinking about cycling infrastructure. So it's not only engineering, it's also citizen engagement, it's also building partnerships, it's also some GR, right, government relations, some tricks that can be handy, that can be employed to build your argument, to build up your to promote your cause. Also, before we start, so yeah, actually, I wanted to announce that that the Q&A session would be mostly run through chat. So, dear participants, please type your questions in chat, and if we have enough time, then we can probably use but the idea was initially to have it through chat. Let's see how it goes. Maybe we can all chat. I mean, in voice, via voice. But yeah. So before we start accepting questions, I would like to ask a question myself. So I already thanked, and it wouldn't be enough from our part to thank the Dutch embassy in Kazakhstan for the support of this experiment with this online format of lectures and conversations. But there is another Dutch embassy, a different one, that helped us find you. It's an NGO, I guess, or some sort of organization called the Dutch Cycling Embassy. Sjors, do you mind telling us a little bit about this organization, what it does, why it's called that way, and yeah, so maybe anything you find useful for us? No.
Yeah, the Dutch Cycling Embassy is a public-private partnership, as we like to call it, an NGO, which focuses on transferring the knowledge on cycling policy, practices, and projects, to transfer that knowledge from the Netherlands to other countries in the world. And what we see in the Dutch Cycling Embassy is that the Dutch national, but also the regional and local governments work together with private companies like the company I'm working for to make this knowledge available, and also to make this knowledge which we have is visible and findable. And the latter is important for example, for a company like we do work, we like to do work internationally, and the Dutch Cycling Embassy helps us to gather contacts and see what we can do. On the other hand, the Dutch Cycling Embassy also provides support for other NGOs like you in Kazakhstan, but also in different countries around the world. I really would encourage you to have a look on the website of the Dutch Cycling Embassy. Follow their Twitter feed. They've got some really good communication people involved, which highlight best practices. And there is an abundance of knowledge available there. I would say that's roughly it. There is this one other thing to say, though. In the Netherlands, we have the Dutch Cycling Embassy. They are focused internationally. But on the national level, we have the Fietsersbond, which is the Dutch cycling community, and they focus on promoting cycling within the country, so nationally, and they lobby for better cycling infrastructure, safer cycling, and for more education.
Thank you. In some 30 minutes before we started the session, I received an email from Nout with his observations following the lecture. Now, do you want to address the question you had in this discussion with the cyclists versus pedestrian mutual regard and respect?
Well, thank you, Adil. Well, as a matter of fact, yes, I would. But on the other hand, I also would not like to make use of time from our guests who are visiting this Zoom meeting and who may have questions and remarks as well. So I will shortly raise my question so that the other people know what my question is. Maybe then Sjors can park it for a little bit and see what kind of other questions there are from our guests, so that in case we are not running out of time, Sjors maybe can address my question in a somewhat later stage. The question I have regards, among other things, the situation behind me, which is a great project of a couple of years ago from the local Astana government, whereby they built a bridge for both pedestrians and cyclists, but where in practice, because I use that bridge to go to my work at the embassy, where in practice the pedestrians, and luckily the bridge is used by the people here intensely, do not mind on whether they walk on the red cyclist path or the gray pedestrian path. And even if they see me approaching, they are not really impressed and do not mind stepping aside, going on the gray pedestrian lane. That gives me the feeling that here the people are not really used to it and are not really used to the interaction between pedestrians and cyclists. I mean, the people are also not used to the interaction between cars and cyclists, but as that is a topic that has been extensively addressed in the lecture of Sjors, I'm not touching upon that, but I'm touching upon this other topic in regard to the interaction between pedestrians and cyclists, as that was, and already the lecture was already 67 minutes, because that was not addressed in the lecture itself. Of course, the government can do something about it. The Akimat can do something about it in regard to giving information, but also there also has to be a mindset in the people itself, which is even more difficult as, of course, the aspect of cycling is relatively new here in the city. So that's for now. Sjors, please park it and please come back to it when we are running out of questions asked by our distinguished guests. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, actually, yeah, we are all participants in this dialogue, and I would like to ask an additional question, following a follow-up to Naut's question, and maybe a bit of comment to Naut's question, because I'm a Kazakh and you both guys are Dutch. So first, in Astana particularly, I guess cyclists are and cycling is not taken seriously, right, by the people. So they see cyclists not that often, and they really don't think that it is something that they should respect the red lane, the bike lane. But the more importantly, the city administration doesn't take it seriously as well, because as we see, most of the bike lanes are built in parks, so it's pure. So they view it as pure recreational activity. But even in parks, I would say, because I lived in Astana, and it's not only in Astana, it's in Almaty, the same thing. So even in parks, I totally understood why people are extensively using the bike lanes instead of the pedestrian paths. It's because the bike lane is so much smoother for walking. And when you walk just a pedestrian, or if you walk with a baby stroller, with a pram, it's much more comfortable to use the bike lane. So I guess this is a part of the answer to this question is, well, the cycling infrastructure is important, but it shouldn't be a big difference in quality to the pedestrian infrastructure. So this is the second point, and the third point. I think that there is a little bit on that in Sjors's lecture, and I pointed that out for myself when I watched it. You said, Sjors, that well, the speed of the cycling and everything else, the way you design the paths, the lanes, is allows different all sorts of people with all sorts of mobility level use the cycling infrastructure for themselves. And you mentioned that, well, here is a scooter, here is a pedestrian, here is something else. So what's your take on that? Both in terms of infrastructure and in terms of culture, right? So what would be your answer to this situation? And is it really that way, the way you say it in the lecture, that pedestrians can walk on the cycling, on the bike lanes, and that's absolutely fine with you personally?
There are numerous answers actually to these questions. Adil, do you think that it will work if I share my screen? Let's
do you have the right to do you need special rights to do this?
Let's see.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, so to start off with the culture part and a little bit of infrastructure. This is the bridge between Kuik and Nijmegen in the Netherlands, and this was opened, I think, 3 months ago. And what you see here in terms of construction is that the cycle path and the footpath are on the same level with a different kind of color, and this really reflects actually the situation Naut is indicating. But the quality of surfacing is actually completely the same. And what you see here on this picture is actually people are walking, but they're also walking on a red part of the cycling path. So you see, is it a culture thing? I don't necessarily think so. People could be used to it, but it's also a convenience issue. People choose where they want to walk or where they want to ride their bike, which is the most comfortable. And if there are a lot of people, and especially during the pandemic, they go out of the way of each other. So what we saw here on this bridge and actually see today is a lot of people walking, and that they really take up space of the cycling path. Could we have designed the footway bigger? Yes, but that would have made the bridge more expensive, and then probably the bridge would have never been built. And I've got a different picture, and you can, and then from a technical point of view, you can actually try to influence behavior. So if you look at this design, this is a bit more expensive bridge in Nijmegen, and here you can see the jogger. He's running on the footpath, and there is a physical separation. The footpath is about 10 centimeters higher than the cycle path, and on this bridge you really clearly see that people tend to stick on the footpath because of this division. But this has a few disadvantages. The first one, and I think very applicable to Kazakhstan, is with during winter maintenance. So when you want to remove snow, you cannot remove the snow from the footpath as easily as from the cycling path. So it's really difficult to keep both surfaces clean. And during winter times, you see here that when it snows, everybody walks on the cycling path because the footpath is not cleaned. And the second, the steep curb is a little bit dangerous for cyclists. If it gets busy, you can hit this curb and you can fall. So we've solved the problem mostly of people mixing, but we created two new problems. And this is a challenge actually to how are you going to deal with it. And third solution, which I can actually show on this point, is this solution. And this is also a very common solution. And this is where we have a surfaced cycling path and a small alt footpath. And especially during the first years after construction, when the condition is really good, you see that people tend to walk on the footpath, although it's narrow, and people ride on the bicycle path. The level is once again still even, but due to a different set of materials, people recognize the tiled pavement as a footpath, because that's what we used in the Netherlands, and that's our most commonly used method of creating sidewalks, those tiles, and the red is asphalt. So there is a lot of different usages in material, and a few different approaches, and each approach has its pros and its cons. And when you then talk about pedestrians and cyclists mixing and reacting to a bell, I had to laugh a little bit when Nout said they are not reacting to my bell on my bicycle. And I think, having worked internationally, it's something which I'm always, which I figured only out after a few years, is in the Netherlands, we know and recognize a cycling bell, and we immediately know that it means get out of the way, a cyclist is coming. Because as a kid, when I went to school, I got my own little bike. I had my bell on it, and I used to ring it to get other people walking out of the way. That was for me as a kid, like 6 or 7 years old, really a thing to do. It was just, I'm ringing, I'm on my little bike. And so it's ingrained in your culture. And I can imagine that when you're walking on this bridge in Kazakhstan, that it's a little bit different for people that they do not immediately recognize the bicycle bell. So it's really indeed, in the solutions could be to use paint and symbols on the bridge to say, hey, this is a cycling path and this is a footpath. You could use it in materials, but it's really looking at what's happening and how do you influence people and what's the trade-off between safety and cleanliness. Adil also mentioned about differences in use. And this is also for me this is an interesting topic, because You can look at a cyclist in a few different ways. There are actually multiple types of cyclists. You've got the road racing cyclist. Those people dress up in Lycra and they go really quick, like 20, 30, even 40 kilometers an hour. And they focused on speed, getting from A to B in the shortest amount of time. Their mindset resembles the mindset of car drivers quite a bit, actually. Speed, directness, efficiency. They do not mix well with pedestrians. But you also have got people who just get on a bike to get from A to B, and they choose it to be a more convenient way. And it's not necessarily that the speed is important or the exercise, but it's just a modes of transportation. And you see there also two types. And then you see the longer distance cyclists, like 8 or 10 kilometers on an electrical bike, and they go up to 25 kilometers an hour. Those you can already a little bit better mix with pedestrians because they don't have this urge and urgency to go quick. And in the Netherlands, you also have the city cyclists, people doing these short trips, going to the neighborhood shop, to school, 2-3 kilometers. They chat and they go pretty slow, but also in really big numbers. And what you see there is the speed is somewhere around 15, 17 or 20 kilometers an hour. And this is important because I think this speed, 20 kilometers an hour, maybe 25, somewhere the threshold. Until that speed, when you're out on a bike, people can see your face, they can see your gestures, and they can communicate with you. So if I'm crossing a bike path and somebody is coming with 15 or 20 kilometers an hour, I can look that person in the eyes, and I can communicate with him without using words that I want to cross the cycling path. He sees that, or she, and they just move a little bit to the left so that when I'm crossing, they just can pass me by. When I'm in a car, I'm cocooned, I'm not making eye contact. When I'm a road cyclist, when I go 35 kilometers an hour, the speed is too quick. This communication does not take place. And you get conflicts, irritation, and actually people asking the right of way. So why is this important? When you talk, for example, about the bridge, which Nout has in the background, you could also say, hey guys, this is a shared zone. Cyclists, adapt your speed till 15 or 20 kilometers an hour. You have the right of way on the cycling path, but it should be given to you in this kind of communication and not be claimed. And this is also when you talk about concepts like shared space. I will put it in the chat so you can Google it. These concepts really work on the communication between participants in traffic. I would like to keep it to this, otherwise I will keep on going for 67 minutes.
Thanks, Sjors. We received a question from in chat from Guljan, a lady called Guljan, and her question was about promotion of cycling culture and establishing of proper infrastructure in Kazakhstan, considering current level of safety on roads and pedestrian habits. So we touched upon pedestrian habits a little bit, and I think that you may not be familiar enough with the situation in Kazakhstan in terms of level of safety on roads, but maybe you could elaborate a little bit on, in general, safety, road safety, traffic safety, and cycling infrastructure. How do they correlate? How do they conflict, or how do they contribute to each other?
If you talk about the correlation between safety and cycling infrastructure, I would say that's a very, very strong correlation. The mass and speed of trucks and cars is much higher and different than of a cyclist. When you try to mix them, So when you have the cyclists on the road, it does not match. There is too much difference in the speed and the mass. So creating segregated cycling infrastructure is, in my opinion, one of the key issues in creating safety and creating a cycling culture. But this is easy said, but it's not easily done, because creating infrastructure is expensive, it takes long, and it might not even yield immediate results. So from a political point, it's a very difficult thing to do, to make these decisions. It's easier to start with communications and marketing campaigns, which are important and actually part of the deal. But when you talk about infrastructure and you look at a city like Alma-Ata and you say, where are we going to start? I would say, do not start, or you can start with creating the right plans. So making a plan for the whole city, make a long-term vision, definitely develop that. But if you want to get success with the infrastructure, make sure, first of all, that it's a coherent cycling network. So you could start in the east of the city and you could start in the west, but if it's not connected, you do not provide a safe connection, a safe route for all the cyclists. So if you want to develop and start off with some showcases, some best practice projects, I would say look, for example, at the university, look at where the students live, and try to connect these two destinations, because you know there is a demand for travel between those two locations, and you might very likely see people using it if it's safe, because it provides a connection and it provides a route for people who want to go from A to B. And by creating these first connections, you see the first users, and the first users, they will ask for more and more. So, and then you can start developing. Let me go quickly to the US, United States. It's one of the most car-centric countries in the world. Even there you see cities like Boulder, which, is my sound still okay? I've got a message on the computer. But Boulder, Colorado, they are one of the leading champion cities in the US. They're very small, but they manage, as a university town, to build cycling infrastructure, and they've got reasonable cycling levels. So they are now exporting their knowledge within the country. So we've got the Dutch Cycling Embassy exporting Dutch knowledge. The city of Boulder, Colorado is doing that for the country. And you could say that, for example, a neighborhood in Alma-Ata or a district could export. You could start there. It's low risk it's lower risk for the politicians than doing the whole city at once. And you could then export the knowledge, the successes, towards other districts in the city. That could be an approach to create the examples of the correlation between safety and good segregated cycling infrastructure.
Thank you, Sjors. Dear participants, please feel free to ask your questions in chat. Type them in. While we are waiting for the questions to arrive, here is another question from myself. So speaking of cycling highways, the extent of the highest extent of using bikes as for transportation. So would it be correct to say that in advocacy in this direction, while you do advocacy to build cycling highways, the key message that you send to the authorities and to the public is that it's not to create extra conditions for the cyclists, but it is an alternative to the car owners.
That's correct. Netherlands is, besides a cycling country, also very much a car-oriented country. We work, we drive a lot of cars, and politicians think it's really important to solve congestion. And to solve congestion, there is a lot of money available. So it's really looking from a policy point of view, where is the money? Where do politicians like to allocate, on which goals do they like to allocate the money? Could be livability, it could be noise, it could be pollution, air pollution, but it also could be solving congestion. So it's really about framing your project, whether it is a recreational project or whether it is, and a recreational project, for example, could stick to politician goals like health, sport, exercise, well-being of people. But you could also say that the same project solves congestion, creates better economic accessibility of the region, makes transportation easier because people are choosing alternatives over driving a car and being stuck in a traffic jam, or driving a car and being in the way of important traffic. So, for example, let me share my screen once again. This project, you could say this is built for people to enjoy the countryside, to have a nice stop and have a picnic like the people on the left, to go for sporting. And people do that. I think 40 or 50% of the users do that on this cycling path. But this is not built for sport. It's not built for recreation. It's not built for fun. It's built to solve congestion. That's what I told politicians. That's where we got the money to build this. That in reality, that half of the people uses it for fun, it's not a policy goal for which we got the money for. And so that's really about how do you frame, how do you position your urban intervention? Because when you talk about urban planning, it's really about which intervention, how do you position it to get support? And this project, it is part of a cycling highway. Its aim is to solve congestion, but it also creates great connections from the city center to the outskirts, to go out to catch fresh air, to find leisure. And when you started talking about the parks in the city, you could say we are going to extend the routes in the parks. We're going to call them greenways. And I don't know how to translate that into Russian, but to come up with a concept like where you can enjoy the countryside, and you plan them alongside the university and alongside the places where students live on purpose or accidental, actually. And then suddenly you have greenways aimed at sports, recreation, and creating a better, healthier population. We also have routes which can be used to do utilitarian cycling. So it's about, in terms of strategy, thinking about what do you envision the project, but it's more important how do others, so the people in power, see your project, and how can you frame your story, what you want to sell, because you're actually selling an idea. You want to sell it to the people with power, and that's really, coming up with the right narrative.
Thank you. Here is another question from Anwar. And the question is, what's in your opinion should be the main points in the cycling strategy for a city? A little bit of context: Almaty is currently developing a cycling strategy for itself, and that should become a policy guideline for development of the cycling infrastructure in the city. So what would you prioritize, like top 3 points that should be addressed in any cycling structure of any city. Well, not any city, of a major city.
Difficult question, but I would say I would always start off with safety, reducing the number of accidents, injuries, and deaths in traffic by promoting a safer cycling and car environment. So that's one. That would be the primary goal. And the other goals depend a lot on the context. I would say that in the Netherlands, but also in Germany and other countries, the discussion about congestion and accessibility has been really important. So I would say in a strategy, we say we're going to focus on cycling to provide an alternative for the car and increase accessibility of our core parts of the city. So that would be a second. A third would be, and this is more the case in countries like Denmark, but Finland, with the winter cycling example, is that we say, okay, we're going to talk about inclusion. And then we say we want to make sure that everybody, even if you do not own a car, that everybody is still able to get to different parts of the city, thus empowering the workforce and making it, giving people more opportunities and abilities to find correct jobs or places to work. So that would be third. Those are strategies or broader goals. In terms of measures, I would say identify corridors where you want to develop safe cycling infrastructure. Start with cycling lessons on schools to educate kids on how to ride a bike and how to navigate the traffic. Identify target groups which might benefit from owning a bike or having access to shared bike facilities. I remember in South Africa that they had this neighborhood where not everybody owned a bicycle, but as a neighborhood they had their own bike share system, which allowed people that if they needed a bike, they would go to the local bike shop. They would be able to rent out a bike from a local guy and head out into the city center to do shopping or go to the offices or whatsoever. So also creating accessibility, not necessarily to the infrastructure, but also to the vehicle itself, I think would also be a very important issue in the city. I do not know exactly the rates of ownership of bikes in Kazakhstan. This would be one of my main advices actually in countries except the Netherlands, Denmark or Germany. All the other countries, usually not everybody has access to a bicycle. Let's see. Yeah, and maybe as last, if there is a strong sporting culture or health issues, I also would say in the strategy, I would really focus on the health impact of cycling in terms of, on one hand, prevention, air pollution, but also obesitas. And on the second, maybe also sports or having, for example, we know that kids who ride to school learn better at school. They are more awake when they arrive at school. So the first hour of lessons is not completely wasted on kids going to school. So you're a bit more effective. But once again, like I said, it's a difficult question. It really depends on, yeah, maybe that's also the main advice. If you develop a strategy, try to align it with existing powerful strategies. That would be probably my main advice, because that might be the key to getting support and then just getting traction and success.
Thank you. It's very context specific, but your the last advice that you've given, well, that's the weakest link, I would say, in Kazakhstan in general, but in Almaty currently, we are witnessing that this is the weakest link, that there is no, there's a big problem with, linking the strategies together to have them all as, integrated, get them integrated with one another. So the next question is about the more specific, is a bit more specific. So in the previous question, you addressed the broader priorities, broader goals, and here is more about one question which is more about the solution. Vladislav is asking, is it worth to make bicycle infrastructure on a major street first, like in a city, or is it better to try on some less important one? So do you, let's say you have already done the research, you generated the data, and you see that it can be a good idea to build a cycling a bike lane on a major street, but wouldn't it be better to first pilot it on the less important?
What did you say last? Would it be better to pilot it on the?
Run it to first build it on a less important street, like side street, which is maybe, yeah, just to run it like a pilot project, not to invest right on into the bigger street.
Mm-hmm. There are actually two issues here. The first is actually the amount of investment needed to build the project. So before I go to big streets or small streets, I think that the main thing would be find the easiest projects and start out with them, because they are the most easiest to build and implement. So and in the meantime, start planning for the big things. But and then when you talk about big or small streets, it's really interesting, because on really big streets, usually there is also a lot of space available. So if you've got like 6 lanes of traffic per direction, if you take 1 lane away, you reduce capacity of the road with 18%, 18 or 20%. If you have a 2-lane road where you have to take out the lane, you reduce on a small road, you reduce capacity by 100%. So the impact of creating more space for cyclists might be bigger on small roads than on big roads. But there is also another element in play here. I think it's the visibility and the champion factor, to say so. If you build a bike lane on a main street in the city, going, for example, from town hall to the courthouse, or on the big streets, and you build this bike lane, this could be this champion projects highlighting to everybody else in the city, look, we are taking cycling seriously. And you're not cycling on the back streets because cars have priority on the main streets. No, we take cycling seriously. And you ride a bike on the main carriageways. So there is this really big market, this example leading by example idea. I remember riding a bicycle in Washington, DC, and when you go from the Senate to the White House, I think it's called Georgetown Avenue, and they put up a bike lane in the middle of the street. A very strange location, riding between 3 lanes of traffic on one side and 3 lanes of traffic on the other side. But everybody sees this bike lane. It's in the middle of the road, and it really highlights this political choice to put cyclists in the middle of the street and start thinking from them. So when you develop your network and you want to make decisions, first of all, look where there is demand. That would be my first idea. But the question was about the big and the small streets. in the longer master planning, I always say small streets because of noise, air pollution, and so on. It's nicer to ride on a small street, but the marketing and image value of these big streets, which are also usually the quickest connections, is extremely high. So if you're able to get this cool example project in, do so, and then use marketing and communication to tell other people, look, you can ride a bike to the middle of the city. It's fun, and so there are different values to it. Yeah, that's about it.
Thank you. Next question from Tole B. Tole B asks, what do you think about subsidizing the purchase of bicycles? Maybe you have some examples in your head where that was implemented, subsidies for the purchase of a bicycle, or in any form, either the tax reduction for sales of bicycles, or even direct subsidies to the people to enable them to get a bike for themselves.
I think there are at least 3 and actually 4 ways there are 4 different ways you can approach this issue. I think the first one, tax reductions, could be really interesting, because then you do 2 things. You make acquiring a bike cheaper. You also send out a signal you want to stimulate sustainable modes of transport. So you can make it VAT, value added tax, free, and it makes it cheaper to acquire a bicycle. This also sends out a signal. The second is direct subsidies on the purchase of a bike. This could be really interesting for specific target groups. For example, students which move to a new town, and if you give them direct subsidies, they might buy a bike instead of a car to go around to the city. Direct subsidies could also work to impoverished villages, or as a question I actually saw in the chat as well, to specific suburbs which have no access to public transportation. Because in the Netherlands, at least, public transportation is also subsidized to provide access to smaller towns and communities. So instead of subsidizing public transport, you should say we're going to subsidize the purchase of bicycles. Those are direct subsidies. The big disadvantage of direct subsidies is that you, as a government, spend the money and you have no control on whether the bicycle is being used or not. The third option are, I would call them indirect subsidies. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but in the Netherlands we have a system that if you work for an employer, the employer can give you money to cover your travel costs. And usually you have to pay taxes. The employer has to pay taxes over those costs that they're giving to you. But you can get a tax-free reimbursement for travel costs when you come, for example, by a bicycle. So we have, for example, 19 euro cents per kilometer. You get that when you ride a bike to work. So then that's an indirect subsidy where you correlate the use of the bicycle to the amounts of money you get. And the fourth option is have reductions in service costs. So for example, the hospital in the city where I live, if you come by bike at least 2 days a week, you get coupons where you can save on maintenance for the bicycle, buy clothes, buy accessories for the bicycle. So that's once again reductions linked to the use. So different approaches in terms of money, where you can do tax reductions, direct subsidies, indirect subsidies, or reductions.
Just to give a short addition to that, the Dutch government, and I think that counts both for the Dutch central government as well as the local government, has this system that as an employee of the government, like the ministry of the Akimat or whatever, you can use part of your salary to buy a bike or to have a Podpiska subscription for a gym, for a fitness center, just in order to stimulate health. I know that, for instance, you can buy a bike for a maximum of 1,750 euros. So that you can then have a tax deduction and you can put that as tax deduction. So when you are paying 50% tax, for instance, what's quite a normal percentage, that means that in fact you only paid yourself 375 euros for the bike instead of 750 euros. So that's an example how the government is stimulating a healthy way of living by giving this kind of opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, thanks, because I was about to ask whether there are any examples of how these are used in the Netherlands or elsewhere. So thanks much for this intervention. The next question, Guljan gets back with the next question, which is, what are successful element stories you may share of advocating choice for bicycle versus affordable version of a car? So you might have addressed this already, but maybe something to add to this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are two things to this. It is tricky, this approach, on one part, because you then market the bicycle as the poor man's transport. If you do not have the money, you ride a bicycle. So when you've got the money, you buy a car. I think the status, and that's interesting, because if you look at the status of the bicycle in the Netherlands actually, when you're poor, you walk. When you get a little bit of money, you get a bicycle, then you get a motorbike, then you get a small car, then you get a big car. When you've got loads of money and you can afford a BMW, you buy this big BMW. But if everybody can buy a big BMW, it's no longer special. So you suddenly start riding a bicycle again. Because then you say, hey, I've got the freedom to choose to ride a bike and drive a car. So it's really depending on the target group, what image you want to convey. So we talked about subsidies. I think those are really important. But I think it's really, you have to be careful not to put the bicycle there as a poor man's transport. But I would try to say, no, it's a very economical and efficient and smart way to do. You're not wasting any money. So you're the smart guy using the bicycle. And for the rich people, you have got the freedom of choice. And because you have a freedom, and because you are making a lot of money, etc., you can just choose to ride this cool bike through the city. You do have a car, but you leave it at home because you can have the freedom of choice. You have this, and this is an image issue. Nonetheless, I do so. So you have to find this mix between making the bicycle accessible and an accessible mode of transport for people who do not have the money. So that's one end, without giving it the image of the poor man's vehicle. And this is a very how do you call it? It's a balancing issue to keep this in mind. And I think also actually the e-bike and the new electrical bikes, they are also gimmicks, and they're really cool, and they have got a better image than a regular bike. So you could also work with that.
Thank you. Actually, she also wrote about e-bikes in this question and in her first question. So, and you in your lecture also mentioned that e-bikes are going to be the game changer in the whole market and the whole culture of bicycle usage. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because her question was about e-bikes and the impact that they may have on the whole story of that we are discussing today.
I think e-bikes are indeed a game changer because they make it easier to ride a bicycle. They make it easier to climb hills. They make it easier to, even if you're not completely fit, to travel longer distances. So they, on the one hand, they increase the reach, the distance which you can ride a bike, but they also make it easier to go through hilly terrain, to go through a little more difficult stretches. So this is really, I think I was in Austria in September, and as you know, Austria is quite mountainous, hilly, and they're really looking at the e-bike as a new mode of transport for all these distances up to 10, 11 kilometers between towns. Even although it's hilly, when you're on an e-bike, you just go up and it's easy, and actually going down, it's a lot of fun. So that's also really pretty cool, going quickly on a good road going down. So there is this, we see, and in the Netherlands, we're relatively flat, but I don't know if you've ever experienced Dutch weather. It's not freezing cold here, but now today it's gray, it's windy, and it's raining the whole day. So if you've got a headwind, and you have to ride through the Dutch fields, which are open, boring, monotonous, and you have this rain gushing into your face, and you're going, pushing like 10, 12 kilometers an hour. Sometimes climbing a mountain is it's better, to be honest, than being soaking rain and cold. And it's like this, it's not like -10, no, it's like 0 degrees, but with this an e-bike, you don't feel the wind, and you're much quicker through this horrendous weather. So it really is interesting to see. But we talked about pedestrians earlier. An interesting thing about e-bikes, they are limited in the Netherlands to 25 kilometers an hour. And this is somewhere this limit, this border between where you're still able to communicate and you're no longer. So if you've got these quick e-bikes, which go 35 or 40 or 45 kilometers an hour, they might be creating a difference, a battle between pedestrians and cyclists, and they might be creating this new discussion. So I'm really fond of this 25, I'm fond of both, but the really quick e-bike might be more of a moped or a motorbike, and the slow one is more like a bicycle. I'll keep to this.
Thank you. 2 more questions, and I think that we would be running out of time. So one is, again, you touched upon this issue quite a few times already, but still. So there are the outskirts of the city, of any city, I guess, and there are the suburbs and the satellite, the settlements from where people often go to the city, to the urban center. And they usually use cars because there's no good public transportation options. And based on your experience, what's your thought? What can be a starting point for a dialogue with the local administrations on development of cycling infrastructure? The question also mentions the rapid rail solutions like trains, suburban trains. So yeah, could you respond to this? I don't know. This is a really a really big problem in Kazakhstan because neither of the city in Kazakhstan enjoys the rapid transportation solution with the suburbs. Although all of the cities have those suburbs, very much populated, and especially in the last 20 years, the population was growing because of the migration from the rural areas. So there are a lot of people living there, and there are no jobs, not enough jobs. So they, most of them, well, economically active people, they travel to the urban centers on a daily basis. That makes that creates a lot of problems with both congestions on the border of the city and inside the city as well, but also with a lot of problems for the people themselves because they don't have any other option. And if you tell them, like, if we let's say the city administration would say, okay, we will give you a bike lane, so go get some bikes for yourself. That maybe not they might not be quite happy about that, right? Because this is wait a second, that's all you can give us? Why not giving us the suburban trains, for God's sake, or like I don't know, BRT? So what's your thought on that?
I think BRT and rail really go well together with cycling, because if you, and it's also a matter of scale of the city. So people living in a suburb, I think it will be really good if you can combine the cycling with the BRT, because if you have the suburb, usually you've got this range, this circle, radius of which a station provides a level of service, just coverage area of a rail station or a BRT station. And usually the coverage area is a radius of about 1 kilometer. So it covers an area of 1 kilometer because they are planned that people are going there by foot. So you have these, every kilometer you need a new stop for the BRT or for the rail. But when you have people riding bikes, the radius of the coverage area increases, because within 20 minutes, and 20 minutes is roughly the time people are willing to walk or bike to a station. So within 20 minutes, you can ride 3 to 5 kilometers. So the radius and the coverage area of the station increases. I'm not a mathematician, but if you go from 1 to 3 kilometers, I think the coverage area, I think, is 10 times as much as it is as 1 kilometer. I think it's something to do with pi. But you get 10 times as much coverage. And this has a few advantages, because BRT and rail systems are incredibly expensive and they cost money to run. And if you have lots of stops, it takes a long time to go from A to B. So your exploitation costs, your running costs of your BRT or rail systems go up when you need a higher amount of stops. So when you combine cycling with the stations and you increase the coverage area, you need fewer stops, you get more people riding, using the system, and the system is faster. So your running costs or your exploitation costs of your public transportation, they go down, while ridership goes up. So it becomes actually cheaper in the long run for the government to provide the services. And people are using the bikes to go back and forth from the stations. That's on the point where people live. And then on the point where people need to be. So in the city, you need to provide them with bike share options so they can use a bike to go to the train, take the train, and then use the bike to do the final 1, 2, or 3 kilometers towards the destination in the city. But there is this, and that is what we see in the Netherlands. Yesterday, a book was published about 20 years of planning for the bike and train combinations in the Netherlands. And we are now investing, national government is investing 200 or 300 million euros in bike parking at train stations, not because they want to stimulate cycling, that's not the policy goal, but they want to get more people into the rail system because that saves the national government a lot of money. So in terms of policy goals, of course, we're stimulating and getting more people on a bicycle, but the reason why they're doing it is to make the public transport system more efficient and save money. So you can develop these links. And in Nur Sultan, I actually also see new train stations being built. You can utilize them better by using the bicycle as a before or after mode of transport.
Thanks. And the last question is from Anwar. It is a case study question. It is a task for you, an assignment. So let's say we have a major street with one bus lane, and it is an which is intensively used, and two lanes for private automobiles. Correct. So three lanes altogether. On the other street, the street next to this street is also three. No, it is 3 lanes for the private automobiles and less intensive use of the bus lane. And you got to insert the bike lane, so it's a must to that there should be a bike lane as well. Where would you put it? In other words, if you have if there is a choice that you have to make, a bus lane or a bike lane, when would it be correct, or I would say when it would be the right thing to do to make a preference towards a bike lane?
I would never give up the bus lane for the bicycle lane, because the bus lane, if it's at high capacity, it moves much more people than a private vehicle lane does. So if you're talking about this example, I would say if you have 3 lanes of private car traffic and 1 bus lane, even although the bus lane is not used as much, it probably will be used to move more people than the private car lanes. So my advice would be, take one of those 3 car lanes, remove them, and make a bike lane out of it. But I would also do another thing, and that is also look at the capacity of the road. And the capacity of the road, so the ability of the road to move private motor vehicles, is not determined by the width between intersections, but it's determined by the traffic light installation at the intersection and the amount of lanes available there. So I can give you a quick example of this principle, which is in the city of Nijmegen. We have then at the intersection, there are 4 lanes for car traffic available, because car traffic has to stop and needs a space to accelerate again. So we don't have a bus lane there, and the bike lane is all the way pushed out to the outskirts of the road. Let me share my screen quickly for this. So let's see if this works. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4 car lanes here. Keep in mind, Nijmegen is a small city, so it's maybe not as big as Kazakhstan, but this is an example I know of. You have a left lane, a right lane, and 2 straight-on lanes. So a lot of space for car traffic. When we go further, you see that the 2 lanes merge. And here at the end, we only have got one lane for each direction, and there are traffic lights, but you can see a long row of cars. So these traffic lights alongside this road are matched. They provide optimal throughput for private motor vehicles. And that actually reduces the need having 2 lanes for each direction. What have we done with this space? You can see it, there's a service road, there's parking, and cyclists can use a service road to ride a bike. Much safer than having 2 lanes each direction with parking and having the bicycles on the road. And when we come to the next major, this is a small intersection, but when we also in terms of capacity, actually at this small intersection, the biggest problem in terms of throughput are left turning cars, because they have to stop and give priority. So if you want to turn left here, so what do we do on this road? We give them 1 lane. If a car has to go left, they can stop and they do not hinder the flow of private motor vehicles. So when we come back towards the big intersection, oh, I'm moving a little bit off here. This is a bigger intersection. We see, hey, the parking is gone, the service road is gone. We get more lanes for car traffic. Suddenly, at the intersection, we have 5 lanes. Because here, at this roundabout, this is the main choke point, and this part determines the capacity. So that's where we widen the road. So to elaborate on this question is, when you've got 3 car lanes, the big question is, do you really need the 3 car lanes for the throughput of traffic, or can you design the whole road to optimize the flow of private motorized vehicles, save space, and use that space which becomes available to redesign the street for safer cycling and pedestrians movement? And I think that 60% of my time, I'm thinking, when we're talking about designs, I'm thinking about how can we improve the flow of cars? How can we reduce the space car needs to keep up the same flow? And this is actually one of the crucial ideas. I do take space away from cars for bicycles when we plan, but I do not hinder the flow of cars. And this is, yeah, it's a way of thinking which in the Netherlands has been optimized. So besides being a cycling expert, I'm also a bit of a traffic manager or a mobility manager.
Yeah, that sounds like magic. You reduce the space for cars, but you do not reduce the flow.
And this really depends on intersections and reducing the amount of points or moments that people have to stop. And for example, having multiple traffic lights next, you have this green wave, we call it. By thinking about it and creating these scenarios, so in the morning rush hour, the traffic lights have a different setup than in the evening rush hour, just to accommodate different flows of traffic.
Cool, thanks. There is one more message from Guljan, a thank you message mostly, but there is a postscriptum about the safety helmet. She asks why safety helmet is not a thing in the Netherlands, even for kids, although safety is claimed a top priority.
Because safety is being done and get by segregating cyclists from danger, and danger comes from heavy vehicles which are going quicker. Safety comes from providing safe infrastructure with smooth surfaces where you don't collide with poles or with anything else. The protection a helmet offers is much less than providing these kinds of protection. If you're hit by a car, a helmet might reduce your injury, but you will still have other injuries. By designing safe infrastructure, you can remove the risk, or reduce the risk of being hit by a car, thus also reducing the need of a helmet. It's always a personal choice to wear a helmet, and I think if you want to, you really should. I prefer not to talk too much about it, because a helmet gives the impression that cycling isn't safe, that it is dangerous, and that keeps people from riding bicycles. You do need a safe environment, etc. But I think it's a choice. Make it for yourself. I actually almost never wear a helmet. I don't really need to, but it does happen indeed that people fall and that they crash, and that the helmet provides protection. But it's a bit of the same as when flying an airplane. You get an awful amount of safety instructions when you board a plane. And because of these safety instructions, everybody feels a little bit that flying might be unsafe. Well, it's one of the safest modes of transportation. By promoting helmets, you might give the impression that riding a bicycle is an inherent risky activity. While it might be, when you choose the right routes and you have the right infrastructure, it's actually a safe and healthy activity, which makes you live longer because of the physical activity involved. And this is really interesting for the Netherlands. Research has shown, when you talk about helmets, that if you start promoting helmets, people will ride less because they think cycling is dangerous, or because it's just a hassle to wear a helmet. And when you talk about general health and population health, the reduction of the use of a bicycle reduces the amount of activity people employ, increases obesity, and thus reduces the general health. So the health gains of wearing a helmet on a population level are in the Netherlands being offset by the loss in activity. But if you want to wear a helmet, and if individuals wear a helmet, this does not apply. So that's why I'm saying keep it as an individual choice, but be very careful about promoting it, because you're actually saying cycling is dangerous and you're not taking away the real risk. And the real risk is that you're being hit by a car. And you can take away that risk by doing good designs, building good infrastructure, doing good campaigns, etc.
Thank you, Sjors. Well, we have already run out of time. So thank you for you being so generous to us and sharing all the knowledge. I'm very impressed by your diligence and the way you treated this project very seriously, and I told my colleagues when I got your video that, well, I think that he told everything very structured in a very structured way, so it can't be better. So for everyone in this room, I invite you to share the video lecture of Sjors with your friends, with your colleagues, with everyone who is interested or somehow related to the topic. So thanks again, Sjors. Thank you again. A big thanks to the Dutch Embassy in Kazakhstan for supporting us in this project, and I guess that there is a good chance that we will get back to this topic together with the Dutch Embassy in the near future. And would like to give the floor to now for the closing remarks, please.
Thank you. Yeah, well, once more, I really would like to thank Urban Forum as our partner of the embassy for accommodating this. I really would like to thank, on behalf of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and the Embassy of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Sjors van Duren for having this, not only for having this lecture, of course, but first and foremost now for having this Q&A session by Zoom. I do think that, well, I mean, it proves that we were running out of time and we had some 15 minutes more, that it is a topic that is very close to people's hearts, that it's very relevant, where we can learn still a lot from it. So I saw already that Urban Forum shared the Instagram link and the YouTube link. We will do that at our embassy pages as well. And I think we even did it both on Facebook as well as on Instagram. Please, if you do not so, also I would invite you to follow the embassy pages of on Facebook and Instagram, Netherlands in Kazakhstan or NL in Kazakhstan. Indeed, I mean, it will continue a priority of the Kingdom of the Netherlands to continue with these kinds of urban city development, safe space, etc. So I really think indeed that this may be a step on a broader path. And well, for now, I really would like to thank also the translator once more for the translations and the active participation by our audience. Rahmet, spasiba. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nout. And indeed, big thanks to Gaini. Gaini is a good friend of ours, a very professional translator, interpreter. Thanks, Gaini, for being with us today. And thank you to everyone. Thanks again. Here is Gaini. Please welcome her. Okay, great. Thanks again, and see you in our next, I don't know, event, virtual, be it virtual or offline. Join, follow us on the social media. Bye-bye.